Welcome to the Control Concepts Insider, where we take a look behind the scenes at Control Concepts, a leading independent AV programming firm established in 1997. I'm your host and tour guide, Steve Greenblatt, and I'm also Control Concepts president and founder. During each session, we will share what makes our company unique and what contributes to our success. I'll also have discussions with our team to share stories and insights from those responsible for doing the hard work to serve our clients and build our reputation as an industry name. With that said, I'm joined by three of our programmers today, two of which were in our last session. And I'll start by introducing Mike Spadafora. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
And next, I'll say hi to Victoria Grupp. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, everyone.
And last but not least, Jonathan Brenner.
Hey there.
So last time our conversation centered a lot about the difference between in-house and independent programmers. And all three of you have background in this area, which is kind of cool. And just to kind of provide some contextual information, Victoria's been with us a few months. Mike's been with us about 1.5 years, and Jonathan's been with us over 2 years now. So it just kind of gives everybody a little bit of perspective as to where they're coming from. And what we find is important here at Control Concepts is to be able to have a progression path and be able to have some way of passing knowledge from each person down, and then also giving a training program so that those that are new, that are coming in, can learn from the people that are in front of them. So Jonathan, I'm going to kind of let you speak a little bit about your background because you also come from an in-house integrator. Tell me a little bit about what your experience has been being an AV programmer prior to being at Control Concepts.
Well, the experience was a lot of independent work and stuff. Usually integrator programmers kind of do a little bit of everything. So, there's plenty of time spent in the office writing code, but there's an equal amount of time on site helping, bring the installation to a close and stuff. A lot of working with the install guys to do commissioning, and you're kind of the guy who gets it done. Really, you're usually the last person on site, wrapping things up. And I kind of moved from doing install work to programming. It seems like it's a rite of passage. If you're going to be a programmer, they want you to at some point have done install. So I did my time in install, and it ends up paying off because even as a programmer, like I said, you're kind of the person who's getting it done on site. So usually I helped with the engineers kind of figuring out systems, then actually writing the code, doing DSP work and stuff, and then being boots on the ground, actually getting everything installed.
So that was kind of similar, Victoria, to your experience. And I think last time when we spoke, you talked a little bit about the responsibility of setting up equipment and doing things that are outside of actually writing code. And now being in a different role, how has the approach to doing programming changed for you? Like what adjustments have you made in how you tackle a project now that you don't have some of those other responsibilities that Jonathan mentioned and you mentioned last time?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be as responsible for the equipment list and making sure that what was bid, what came in, and what we were purchasing was actually going to work. So in that programming process, I'm actually researching equipment and making sure that it's going to do the X, Y, and Z that we're promising. Versus being at a software development company, we're not in that part of the design. Someone else is responsible for the design. So there's a different boundary there where we can try to meet all the needs. And in a lot of cases, a lot of equipment can handle multiple functions. So we can play with that. But then at the end of the day, we can, if we can't do something because the equipment doesn't support it, we can't do that. So that's been a pretty big difference for me, especially with my first jobs here being more, still not being modules, but still being integration type programming. That's been a very big difference for me, is not being responsible for the equipment list and the drawings coming out. Basically, like Jonathan was saying, that you're being the last on the field, being the last out there commissioning it, and having started as an installer, you have all of that background and all of that knowledge. And I felt like I continued to be responsible for the whole thing, if that makes sense. Versus now I'm just responsible for this one portion, and I get to do that one portion really well.
And I think that that's the important part that I wanted to bring out, because if you weren't going to get to that, I was going to try to reiterate it. There's from my experience and what I believe, one of the things that we do differently, and probably others who specialize in just doing programming, is we put a lot of planning and emphasis on the upfront work, and we want to make sure that what we're going to deliver is going to be what a client is expecting. But also we think through the code. We don't just get it done. We don't just get to a keyboard and make sure that we have to hit our deadline, but more so, how are we going to get it done in the right way that the client needs?
There's definitely something to be said for thinking of your code and program as the product versus just this piece. It's a stepping stone to get paid. It is the thing, and you can do a lot more and be a lot more reliable with it.
I think that that's well said. I'll want to bring Mike into the conversation and kind of shift our gears a little bit. But if you have any comments to share on that, please do. But also, I know that you're starting to get more entrenched into the software development side, being here for some time, and as Victoria's come on and behind you, and you've started to progress your skills. I'd like to know, like, what feelings, what are the things that are going through your mind as you start to take on more of the software development side, and how does that differ from what you know of in the past from just AV programming?
Yeah, it's kind of like starting anything that's new to you. There's always going to be, you're stepping away from, things that you were pretty comfortable with, like normal systems programming. I would guess that I've done, 100 plus, systems at this point. So it's a pretty, rudimentary thing now, and then stepping into, something new. It's just, you have to learn, all new stuff. And it's, it can be daunting at times for sure. Like, I think in the past year, I've gotten my feet wet in at least 7 different new programming languages. So it's, but at the end of the day, there's always, the end goal and the job you have to get done. And you pretty much have to do what you have to do to, succeed and help the company succeed. Any
particular roadblocks or challenges or surprises that you've encountered along the way?
There really hasn't been that many. I know I touched on this a lot back in our last session together, but I mean, just having a really good team to lean on and ask questions to really has made it, significantly easier than if I was, diving into it myself and, needed to pretty much figure out everything from scratch. Luckily with, especially module development, there's a lot of legwork that was already done, creating like our own framework to architect, modules and stuff like that. It leaves a lot of the guesswork out and kind of lets you just, focus on, the things you really need to know instead of knowing everything, 100% right off the bat. You can kind of, it makes it easier to collaborate with people and, ease yourself into it. So you can, learn the things that, you need to learn more of a stepwise manner instead of just trying to accomplish everything all at once. So it's definitely, so as far as like roadblocks go, there really hasn't been too many, especially, one with the team being an excellent resource, and then just, I mean, the internet, you can't really you can't really knock the availability of information. So yeah, I mean, that's about all I got. I really don't think there was anything too, too roadblocky about getting started.
I was going to say, I think the closest thing to a roadblock really is just the amount of information, you've that pressure of feeling like you need to know everything right out of the gate, because there's
Right.
so much that, is there. While it's not actually a roadblock, it feels like it coming into it, because it's like, it's a daunting thing to see how much
Yeah,
you don't know and how much, you're going to work with. Like you said, 7 different programming languages is, that's a tall order to be exposed to that much new stuff. So until you get your feet wet doing it, it can definitely seem like a roadblock at the start.
yeah, it's almost like a little bit of like a sensory overload at first.
Yeah.
And then, once you can start wrapping your head around like, oh, well, I don't need to know everything about this programming language right now. I need to know A, B, and C. Then you can kind of like focus in and,
Yeah,
accomplish
you got to
the task.
learn what you need to know when you need to know it, rather
Right.
than just knowing it all. Yeah.
Not
Well,
all of
Jonathan,
it.
I was going to come to you next, because what I wanted to touch on a little bit is your background outside of the AV industry. You had education in full stack development, and if you, for those listening, want to check out the blog post that Jonathan wrote, it's can be found on our website, basically talking about how to look at AV programming or AV software development through the lens of full stack programming. But how do you feel, like, how important do you think that type of background is? And also, like, what are the challenges too, and coming from that background and trying to apply it to AV? I know that's probably a lot to answer.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I started out, in full stack development, specifically like web development kind of stuff, and then found my way into the AV industry. So, there's not a whole lot that translates one-to-one, coming from web development necessarily into AV. So getting into AV was still kind of like a new learning experience of, something totally new, moving out of the world of variables and HTML and JavaScript and stuff into flow-based things like Crestron, was different. But I think ultimately the full stack mindset was really what helped make the transition easy. And I guess I talk about that in that blog, is that really along the lines of knowing what you need to know when you know it. Full stack development, you've got to know basically at least a little bit about everything that it takes to produce what you're producing. So even though you're building a website, there's also an expectation that the HTTP protocol going on in the background, and the server hardware that's running on, and networking, and how that data is transferred, and the whole OSI model of everything that's involved getting from point A to point B. And that actually translates really well, maybe not at first glance, but once you start doing AV work, you realize just how many different technologies you're trying to wrangle. So, naturally, having to have a good understanding of networking works out well for all this networked AV gear that we have. Having already been exposed to that, it wasn't daunting to figure out what I needed to know in the AV application of that technology. And the same thing for, most of the other devices, having to build a UI on a touch panel correlates really well to having to design an interface for a web page or a web app or something like that. So I think when you really look at it, there are a lot of similar requirements of you, to know a bunch of different technologies and bring them all together to make one cohesive thing. So having gone from that full stack sort of thing into AV and getting to kind of see how those are similar, then moving to this, to us doing software development, it's actually liberating, because now I know, the world of AV. I have the full stack mentality of, know I need to know when I know it, known, a variety of things. And now I get to leverage all of the power of standard programming languages and the, wide array of solutions that can be provided by stuff that's already out there, non-proprietary to a specific, control manufacturer or something. So now that I can see everything that kind of correlates one-to-one with that kind of background, now I get to apply it and, be able to excel at what we're doing.
So it very well put, and it sounds to me like it's the mindset that of what was learned, and the technology was kind of secondary, but more so the understanding of how do you tackle the challenge of trying to do something from beginning to end, or from the user to the back end, and bring them all together.
Yeah, the technology or the programming language is really just the medium from which you're getting A to B. It's the mentality of trying to bring everything together and all that really matters.
Yeah, at the end of the day too, it's, from a bird's eye view, everything that you work on is a system. You know what I mean? Like, you have an AV system and there's pieces and parts that bring things from point A to point B. You work on a module, there's pieces and parts inside the module that bring things from point A to point B. And the same thing with web development. From like I said, from bird's eye view, it's all, if you can grasp and understand a system, then it makes it a little easier to transfer that understanding from practice to practice. Yeah.
Victoria, I'll bring you into the conversation, and a lot of what we discussed was learning. That was probably a common word that came up a lot. I liked the whole idea of getting hit by a fire hose, but also being able to learn the things that you need to know. And you've been a quick study in the few months that you've been here, and I'm sure that you've been hit by a lot of new things. What are some of the either methods or techniques that you've used to navigate through them, and what are some tips that you would give to somebody else in that situation?
I mean, really, it's just take it one thing at a time. Like Jonathan and Mike were saying, it can get very overwhelming if you think about it. And realistically, I was in that boat as well, that you put all this pressure on yourself. But thankfully, because of the team that's here, I very quickly realized that all of that pressure was just me putting it on myself. So just take it one thing at a time, identify what it is that you need to learn, like what is preventing you from taking that next step or doing that next thing. That's really my biggest thing. But I mean, and kind of like Jonathan was saying, some of my background did allow me to learn skills to take it a thing at a time, right? So as a AV programmer in general, I was learning those different languages. And so there was a certain skill set built with that. And even a little before that in college, dealing more with like C+ with Arduino and stuff, even though realistically you could probably run a lot of our stuff in that type of environment now. It's just take it a thing at a time, identify the thing you have to learn.
I think that's a fair way of putting it, and very, very simple tip and easy to remember. I'm going to ask each of you kind of the same question in a different form, and I could come back to you now, Victoria, on it. What makes somebody want to pursue the path of being an AV software developer? Knowing that, hey, I was really good at doing this AV programmer thing, but I'm gonna take this chance in not starting over, but being vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, so in my old role, I was happiest when I was dealing with the code, even though realistically it was a much simpler version of what we will do here. I was finding my happy when I just was at my computer working on the code, making it all go together. And so that's how I've found my path, just following my happy. So doing the equipment designs, going to the field, having to resolder something, having to rewire something, that wasn't my happy. And it was very apparent to me. And so that's how I've decided that this path is a good path for me. And as I've started here and been here a few months, I'm just continually getting happier. I don't know if it works for everyone, but that's how I found it as my path.
To control concepts where you can find your happy. I appreciate that. That's a good slogan.
Quote it.
I will, and I'll give you credit too. Mike, in similar vein, doing something new is fun, challenging, as we discussed. But a lot of people can be very comfortable doing the same thing, and just getting really, really good at it and not having those pressures and the stresses of doing new things. What type of a person do you think is somebody who is going to excel being, doing that AV software development, knowing that you don't know what's going to get thrown at you the next, from one day to another?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a personal standpoint, I mean, I really like to learn things. I don't like living in a world in a box, knowing that outside of that box, there's a million other things that, that can be learned. I would never knock anybody who likes to, who finds comfort in repetition and, doing things that you're familiar with and things that you enjoy doing. I mean, that's, if that's the kind of person you are, then more power to you. That's great. Whatever you do, make sure you enjoy doing it. Me personally, like I don't like the idea of not knowing how to do things. And, personally a little obsessive about learning new things. Like if I'm working on something at home and I'm, on my computer, I'll find myself up until 3 a.m. because every single time I figure something out, I realize there's another thing I need to figure out about it. And I just keep going and going and going until I'm like, all right, I got to go to bed. So yeah, I mean, like getting into the AV software development world, I mean, it really just depends on, how interested you are in learning everything that world has to offer. And again, like if it's not for you, if it's not something you think you'd be interested in, or if you just really find comfort in doing the things that great. But if not, then there is a bigger world out there, for you, and it's just, it's waiting for you.
That's fair. So Jonathan, I'll take a little bit of a different spin on it. Not only am I curious about, what motivates you and what you found to be most rewarding about the AV software development role, but also where do you think it's going from here? What do you think the possibilities are, and how do you see the role evolving?
So yeah, I think the big thing for me is obviously I'm really passionate about programming. Like Victoria said, it's kind of my happy is getting to program. It's always been, it's kind of like my hobby and my job at the same time, so I've obviously got a passion for doing that. And the big thing though, like when you're doing web development stuff, you're just creating websites over and over and over. So I think AV gave me an application for the software that I would write that was more fulfilling, in that you could actually see real things react to the code you wrote, rather than have a nifty website and a cool drop down and yada yada. You could actually see, shades move and lights dim and screens turn on and things like that. All that automation stuff. It's a cooler end result when all is said and done. So naturally, AV software development is a great fit because I can geek out about programming while also being excited to see things happen in real life based on, the things I've written. And I think looking to the future, I think the role of AV software developer is going to be a lot more common, really, or at least more in demand. I think at this point, the solutions that are, really quick one-off kind of things have all someone has developed, a solution for the small conference room in one way or another. You can see with like Crestron Mercury systems and things like that, where it's supposed to be just drop this device in and a display and you've got a small conference room. And I think there's more and more separation between the run of the mill stuff and the custom or more difficult or more complex things. And I think when you get into that level of complexity or uniqueness or customization or whatever, the current proprietary solutions and stuff just kind of end up falling short to some degree in some aspect. So being able to leverage the whole suite of programming languages or platforms, or basically not being limited by what a single language or technology can do, makes it, a no-brainer that you would rather have, software development mentality towards those complex or difficult things, rather than trying to fit inside the box of one particular manufacturer or one control platform or something like that.
I think
So
that's
I
a
could see
good
it
way.
being, yeah,
sorry, say that again.
I'm just going to say, I could see it really being a prominent thing, less need to automate, more need to provide a solution.
Well, I think that's a good way for us to wrap this up. Been a great session, a great conversation with you guys. I think one of the things that I also want to reiterate is that in taking the software development route, we also can look outside of what we know to be the traditional AV system in the AV control world, because you can apply those same types of skills to other platforms as well, in that sometimes we write applications. We've also, as Jonathan's mentioned, develop web pages. All of these are integrating products, but they're not necessarily limited to the technology that we all have known in the past. We can leverage more mainstream technology and more common platforms and hardware. So just an interesting thought, and something that I like to make sure that we also share with our audience and make known to everyone. But thank you guys for joining us and spending time to learn more about Control Concepts. By taking a look behind the scenes, we hope that you'll get to know us better and become more familiar with our team, and find that you connect with us and our core values and mission. Please feel free to reach out to any of us directly, and also visit our website, controlconcepts.net, and check us out on social media. That's all we have for today, and this has been the Control Concepts Insider.